everyone. Thanks for coming tonight to our meeting. If you haven't been here before, Dunwoody Homeowners Association, I am the current president. My name is Bob Pasella. Hey, can I see a show of hands of how many people in the room are paid members of the Dunwoody Homeowners Association? Fantastic. If you're not, you'll have to, no, you can stay. But membership is only $40. We'd love for you to join. Not only is the DHA responsible for the Dunwoody Parade, Light Up Dunwoody, Food Trucks Thursday, and the Dunwoody Farmers Market, but we do host forums and meetings like this. So for $40, it's a steal. Just Google Dunwoody Homeowners Association and you can pay online, and we'd appreciate your support. I put out the agenda, but before we get to some of our featured speakers, I want to recognize our elected officials tonight. City Council, John Hennigan, Rob Price, Stacy Harris, Joe Seconder, from DeKalb County Commission, Robert Patrick. Of course, we have Anna Hill with us. Am I missing anyone? Candidates, oh, no, you're not an elected official. Put your hand down. Candidates for office, we have Tran Long. Do you want to stand up and give us your 30-second spiel and tell us what you're running for?
Real quickly, I'm running for House District 80, which is formerly 79. The new district now includes Dorribo, Dunwoody, and a portion of Shamrock. It was previously held by Mike Walensky. He's not running again, so I'm stepping forward to run quickly in the 30 seconds. I want to address the school budget issues. Our schools have a funding formula that's over 30 years old from our state legislature. Our governor cut over $500 million for the 21-year budget. We need to fully fund our schools. Secondly, we have a labor issue within Georgia. We're not developing enough homegrown talent to fill the jobs of today and tomorrow. So I'll close with this. You don't have to raise taxes to do good in this state. You just have to spend money wisely. And so hopefully when November comes around, I've proven to you that I've got the best fiscal mind to be in the State House.
And we might be doing a candidates forum later on in the year, so we'll let you know about that. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thanks.
For all the board members here, we need to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was actually in February, the end of February. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second? Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, done. All right, let's get to the heart of the agenda. We'll start off with the multi-use trail. Tom Taylor had a few things he wanted to speak about. Tom, the floor is
And I know
yours.
we've actually got a lot of people here to hear from the school board stuff too. So what I'm going to do is just give a brief overview, and if we can move the meat of this to the next meeting, I'm just going to give a short little brief here because I know people are more interested in that, the following events than this one.
So
So
don't cut yourself short.
thank you.
Yeah, don't cut it short.
A terrible slouch. Yeah. No. One thing I want to say is May is a Military Appreciation Month in the United States, culminating with Memorial Day on the 31st. Veterans, basically a lot of us had served, all of us had served at one point, raised our hand and said, pledged a blank check up to including our lives to protect, defend, protect. God, I remember the other, but basically gave up everything we had to serve during the period of time we served. So if you meet a veteran, thank them. Memorial Day, I'm sure the city of Dunwoody is going to have an event. Multi-use paths. I know the city's doing a lot of these around town. We've got a plan. There's a plan to do one, and I don't have a big blow up with this, but Winter's Chapel, if you can picture this, from about where the cemetery is, or Fontainebleau across from the synagogue there, down to Peeler, hangs right on Peeler, heads down toward Tilly Mill. 12 feet wide, normal. It's just like the Brook Run paths and things like that. I guess the biggest issue here was a real lack of communication. They've already started construction on part of this. And, what we thought was concept, preliminary design, final design, right-of-way acquisition, utility location, construction complete. We had concept, and now we've got construction going on right now. This was not communicated, and this has been an issue with the city for a long time. Communications, you can put stuff on the website, but there's a lot of people that don't hit the website. We've got a lot of new residents in here that just don't know, and particularly with the affected people. The one down Peeler is the one I'm going to talk about real quickly. because most of the homes in that 1.5 mile stretch face Peeler Road. And most of the right of ways and things where these paths are gonna go, the homes face the road, or at least on a corner, it's on the side. The ones in my neighborhood, because the neighborhood was constructed in 1982, all those homes that are on Peeler, the backs of the homes face there. There's a very narrow right of way there, covered with trees, covered with a lot of utilities. It crosses the DeKalb County water lines there as well. There's a linear park on the other side of the road. Many of these properties fall within what would have to be taken with, basically in a domain or whatever the city decides to do. But a lot of these folks have pools in their backyards, have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with spas and in-ground things like that are on their properties that would be affected by this. And it's objectionable because basically they said, you're gonna have to take down your fences. We're taking down about 150 trees along Peeler. Now, some of those need to go. Some are along the power lines and things like that. I don't disagree with that. But no one on the affected houses, particularly the ones, I live back in the neighborhood, it doesn't really affect me as much, but those affected houses, there's about a dozen of them on Peeler, their backyards are now gonna be, people are just gonna be coming up that trail and into the neighborhood without any obstruction. Right now, every single person there has a private privacy fence, with cover to the pool or whatever. Those are in that proposed zone. So they expose those backyards to anybody who wants to walk off that trail or come in there. We've had a lot of crime in there anyway, because we've got 2 homeless camps, one that's located, if you know the area, behind the Ruby Shell, in that area about Glaze Drive, and another one further up Winters Chapel that has about 50 people in it. The city does not have the assets or has not directed assets to move them. We're worried about the crime. We had a meeting with our city councilman, Tom Lambert. He said, well, basically, if they have to take down trees, they have to take down fences, we'll put either basically a landscape barrier, which is not going to stop anybody. Right now, we have one way in and one way out of the neighborhood. So you have to drive in, or even on a bicycle or walk in. You got one way in and one way out. This would open up everyone's yards to that. The other thing of this is we said, okay, what about the city building a security fence like the linear park right across the street where the reservoirs are? Sure, we could do that. And we had a neighborhood meeting with Jennifer Wheeler's house in our neighborhood. We got back to the city planner and said, no vegetation screen, no fence. If you guys want to take up an assessment and build your own, that's fine, but the city's not going to do that. And this is really sticks in my craw because, again, this was not communicated very well, and there's a big disconnect between what city council knows and what the people who are executing the plan. There's a plan for a second path, and I can pass this around, to come down from where Ruby Shell is, down the water line easement where it meets Peeler Road. And asked why was this in there? Because if you're coming down Winters Chapel to turn onto Peeler, it's on the map, Joe. Coming down Winters Chapel to turn onto Peeler, why is this here? Well, if somebody doesn't walk to Peeler, they can come down the water line. That means we'd have our total neighborhood of 46 homes, basically everybody's home that faces either the water line, which is every home in the back of the neighborhood, or the road, would have a path in their backyard. It's unnecessary, redundant, and frankly dangerous. The last thing I'll get to is basically, we're worried about crime because we have a 20% vacancy rate in our police department right now that is not being filled. We've got, we lost 24 officers last year. We have 11 open positions that have not been filled. I talked with police leadership the other day. I was at city council. It is difficult to hire cops right now. I know that people don't want to be cops. It's a dangerous job. On the flip side, the DeKalb County Sheriff's corrections officers are making more than our police officers are. Whatever resources it takes to get us manned back up, I think we need to do. And one of the reasons when the police chief Grogan came out with a report this year, we're down 20% in officers, but we're up 25% in crime. And I think those correlate because they're putting out fires. They just can't get to places fast enough. And Joe DeVita and some other people that were on the Citizens for Dunwoody, this is why one of the reasons we formed the city, because DeKalb County had great officers, they just did not have enough to deal with the issues. And our officers don't do anything proactive anymore. We've got our citizens patrol, but they have no police power, they can observe. But again, they're putting out fires, they're going from call to call, and you get a lot of overtime. Again, out of a 50-person force, or a little bit more than that with the command staff, we had 24 resignations or firings last year. That's half, roughly. Anyway, I've had my say. Bob, I next put this on the agenda for next meeting, where we can discuss more fully. I can have better graphics and stuff like that.
Count me in, help.
What can the residents do at this point? What can we say now? I don't know the procedure in this meeting, that's why I'm asking.
City council, that's, and again, John, you're the other District 3 commissioner, but what I would say the biggest problem with this has been communication. And that goes back with a lot of things. I mean, we get a nice little quarterly, what I'll call fluff piece. And, when we had our annual meeting, the first thing on there was, well, Dunwoody now has a neighborhood bar, or a rooftop bar. Great. Nothing else, not much else, except, I think some priorities are misplaced here. Before you start spending money on things like this and don't communicate it. And again, some of these things are being executed, and the first time people hear about it is when the shovels in their yard or surveyors are out there walking in my yard. That's the communication is a big issue. If it could get communicated better, I'd be a lot happier with this. But John.
Thank you, Tom. As far as I know, the Winter's Chapel Trail that's currently under construction has been vetted and planned and discussed previously. And this new one that you're talking about on Peeler is new, it's preliminary, it's very preliminary, and we don't have rough drawings. It's rough drawings at best, just to see what the layout is. And then from there, we're talking to the residents. Tom met with your community. And as far as I can tell by the plans that are published, it looks like everything's going to be done within the right of way on Peeler and abutting your community. And as far as I know, the fences are all staying from what I saw. The real issue that I know that you have a big concern of is that your neighborhood sits lower. Yeah, your street is up here.
Yeah.
And your fences are down here. And
You got-
the vegetation gone. That's we
Along
understand
some of those areas, it varies from one end to the other.
Yeah.
But it goes from about 8 to 12 feet below grade as you move along the road.
Right now, the city of Dunwoody has about 8 construction projects for trails throughout the city. The Peeler one is actively under construction, and that was vetted previously. These
Winter's
other,
Chapel.
I'm sorry, Winter's Chapel, you're correct, you're right, I'm sorry, there's too many going on. But we have 8 in total that are in very preliminary stages and that are being vetted, and the residents that live along those pathways are communicating with me. When the agenda came out about paths, I didn't know which one was up for discussion tonight. I called and said, is it Tilly Mill? Is it Peeler? Is it Winter's Chapel? Because I've talked to people on all bunch of them this week, so I wasn't sure what the issue was.
Well,
So a lot of them are very preliminary, and typically what happens is that the staff works with the individual residents to talk about trees and buffering and maybe move a path here or there a little bit to try to understand what's happening.
So I guess the thing with Peeler though is, Michael Smith said, we had a window here where we could go past, we could go past utility relocation and move it well ahead of schedule before the final, and there's people driving golf carts down there right now. And again, we have a lot of street racing and things like that along Peeler. We had a wreck a couple of weeks ago that took out that whole veterinary practice. The whole building. And so we've had ATV and motorcycle riders coming through there at night, doing the racing. And again, our police just are not deployed there because they're deployed at 285 in the mall. And that's the second half of it. It doesn't deal with this. That's not this exactly, but it's a symptom of what, we've got crime because we have a lack of police. What we're worried about is making our neighborhood more accessible to people from that trail.
All right, I'll tell you what, next month, we'll put it on the agenda. I'll see if we can get Michael and or Tom over here to talk about that. I'm sorry, you had something?
I would like to invite the council to come to my house and look at actually what you approved. Because,
Approved anything yet.
well, if you start building something that's part of a whole, that tells me you've approved it.
Nothing.
Why would you put a piece in, why would
Dealer.
you lay concrete on a
Winter
complete, why would you lay a piece of concrete on part of something that if you're not gonna do the whole, that's like a waste of money.
I'm sorry, where are you speaking of?
I'm speaking of Winter's Chapel. You don't
You're on
start
Winter's Chapel.
building a house and put the foundation if you don't intend to build the whole house. That's the basic thing that I say.
We could have a presentation and show the phase one, it's a phased approach and you gotta deal with people, we're working with Petrie Corners, there's multi-jurisdiction and so on, so it's a phased approach and I think we need to have our staff.
Before the
present.
meeting, come to
what
my
happened.
house.
All right,
I'll
well,
show you problems.
before then, we'll address that next week, and Jerry, you have
Is
something.
it next?
Yeah,
week?
I-
Next month, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the Tilly Mill trails. And for all of you, if you get the weekly Dunwoody email, there is a link for a survey. And I am very upset about the fact that I made a comment, and I want it for next month as well, the Tilly Mill, that I want to know if they did a study, a water study, because
Right.
Tilly Mill floods by Nancy Creek, and a street in our neighborhood, Vintage, floods. And to put a 6-foot path, there's a sidewalk on the other side of the road. I don't know that there meant that, sorry, Joe, but I don't know that there are that many bicyclists that need a 6-foot path when you have a sidewalk on the other side that could cause a water issue. And for any of the houses that are on that side, especially with the 12-foot one, I don't know how that impacts the water flow into their yards. So if someone from the city could come next month where we could kind of talk about our concerns, I think that would be
Jerry, that's a
extremely
great
helpful.
comment, and part of the project, from what I remember, is that it also has the stormwater aspect of it, where we will be finding solutions to control that stormwater. I'm very aware of the Vintage Lane, I'm very aware of the issues there. There's a number of houses right in that area that I'm very aware of, and we're looking for solutions to make this project to help solve some of those issues that you're.
Well, even the gas station across the street that's actually in Doraville, that lot floods. So, and the
Again,
street
We're
goes
looking
down.
for stormwater solutions, and it's part of the project as far as I know.
Okay.
All right, we'll
Just really quick question, if you could just repeat what you said.
we're gonna talk about this next month,
The
ladies.
homeless camps were again, please? You mentioned the homeless camp, you said there were 2 locations.
There's one on, if you look at Glaze Drive
Mhm.
and the corner there between Winter's Chapel, Peeler, and Glaze, there's an area behind there, just a place called Ruby Shell, which is a Shell station. It's got a car, not a car wash, you got a laundromat and things there. Behind there's one that goes down toward Glaze Road. The other one's up. If you can picture this, Winter's Chapel heading towards Peachtree Industrial, past the last set of apartments, before you get to the townhomes, up at almost the very end, before the intersection, there's about 6 or 7 acres of woods back there. There's about 50 people live back there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll address this next month, we'll put it on the agenda.
What
We'll
date
see.
is that? Is that month, next?
That's June 5th.
First
Thank you
Sunday.
very much.
We'll do it June 5th next month. Thank you, Tom. PDK master plan noise, Jerry Penn has some concerns.
Yeah, I just spoke to Commissioner Patrick about it. There was a post on Nextdoor where someone was saying that we should write letters to encourage the county commissioners not to pass the PDK master plan. Well, I knew nothing about a PDK master plan, and we're one of the communities that is probably, District 3 is probably the closest to PDK. And so I did write emails to both Commissioner Patrick and Commissioner Terry. And I would like to know about it. If it's expansion, how is it going to impact the city of Dunwoody? And so Commissioner Patrick is going to send me a link that right now the advisory boards meetings are on Zoom. And I'm hoping that, I'm gonna get on those links, but I'm hoping that maybe somebody here on the DHA board or not on the board might want to also get that link to find out more about this PDK master plan. Perhaps we can invite Mario Evans, the director of PDK, to do a presentation so that we know what's going on, what they're planning for the future that could impact our community.
Robert, did you want to address this for a sec?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, as always. I appreciate it, Jerry.
Thank you for coming.
So first and foremost, they are not expanding the runways. There will be no new concrete or asphalt laid for additional length. There are discussions on where the market is going, and that's typical of what you would find in a master planning document. In the past, there's been a lot of single prop engines that have been using that airport. I think the market will be changing perhaps to a little bit more on the corporate side. But there will not be an expansion of the airport. The length of those lanes are right now will stay the same,
So you're saying larger planes are gonna fly in?
possibly.
I think I read in the master plan, Robert, that I think there's 355 flights a day that leave and return to, and that's gonna jump from in 2040 to about 470.
And it's also important to remember that the flights that were, I believe, in the early, I should say, late 1990s, early 2000s, before the Great Recession, we've not got back to those numbers again. Yes, sir.
What changes are you aware of to the flight plans which will directly affect you?
So that part I'm going to say is my understanding is going to be more guided by the federal government than by what
Will there be public comment on that?
there has to be public comment.
Okay.
And again, that's going to be at the federal level. And that,
How do we
if you,
do it?
years ago, if you remember, there was discussion about lowering the flight ceiling.
Yep.
And as a former Doraville resident, my house was right at 285, and between my house and my neighbor's house is where the airplanes would come and go. And if you remember, I guess around 2015 timeframe, there was an airplane that had crashed into the retaining wall at 285. That was about 300 yards from my house. So I'm keenly aware of that. I will also say, you know, where I lived in Doraville, there was the train, Norfolk Southern, there was 285, East Street Industrial, Beacon Highway, and the airport. And so we were used to noise, but also kind of tuned out after a while. It's not something that was big on our radar. So everyone slept well in my house. Other question?
Not a question, I was involved with the one lowering the flight path. What pushed that, and this was probably in about 2009 or 10, 11, I forget that timeframe, yeah, okay. So what happened there is PDK is the second busiest civil aviation airport in the United States, Van Nuys, California being the first. The footprint, you really can't expand on that. What they did was because of the increased traffic at Hartsfield, and so the civil aviation airports like Charlie Brown, Lawrenceville, places like that, they basically said, we've got enough traffic coming into Hartsfield that we need to push down like 1,000 feet of AGL for the approaches, which was going to obviously lower altitudes,
More
more noise, we're gonna be closer. But that was basically went to the FAA. I know a lot of the communities appealed to that, but the FAA had it in their mind that this is Hartsfield's the busiest airport in the world,
Right.
and anything ancillary to that, you're just gonna do. So,
That said, the master planning process, as I understand, finished midsummer last year, and that there were a lot of emails that were being sent in. We took all of those emails with all of your concerns and have been working on putting together a list as well as responses to those concerns. Talking with staff, they are looking at the concerns that were raised and making sure that the comprehensive plan does work to address those. So it's taking a little bit longer, but please understand we are working on it.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Robert, thanks for coming as always. We appreciate it.
Yep, and I know you guys know how to get in touch with me, but want to give you my card and also say that DeKalb County does have resources for homelessness. So by all means, reach out to me and we'll see if we can get Mr. Alan Mitchell to see what we can do to address
Robert, are
that.
you up for re-election this year too?
I'm not,
Okay.
2024, but I still always act like I'm under election, and if you need me, you've got me. My cell phone is 470-379-3813. Happy to give you a card. If you need me, give me a call. As a senator once told me as a joke, you can call me 1 o'clock in the morning. You might get a 1 o'clock in the morning response, but I will help you on whatever that issue is, so that ultimately the issues are taken care of. Okay?
Thanks, Robert,
All right, thanks,
appreciate
everybody.
it. All right, next on the agenda, perhaps you've heard our DeKalb County School District Superintendent has been dismissed. Maybe not. We're joined tonight by our school board representative, Anna Hill, to tell us what she can. And afterward, Anna will take some questions. We're not gonna stay here all night and answer questions. Sorry, folks, can't do it. But I ask you to be respectful for her, and Anna,
Thank
the
you.
floor is yours.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Just put my phone up here. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me in the back? Okay. Tonight, I'm here to speak to my homeowners association and with neighbors who've expressed concern about the actions of the past week. I was happy to accept the offer to meet with you this evening. Though I know you would prefer I discuss other issues, I wanted to bring to you important work that has been underway for more than a year. Work that affects schools not just in District 1, but across our district. Before I give you an update of some key issues that I've been working on, I want to clarify that serving on a school board is not the same as working within an organization or simply being a member of a group. To be efficient and per the charter, the group has to operate as a unit. Specifically, board policies and procedures state that the board chair shall generally serve as the official spokesperson for the board. Out of respect for this longstanding policy, I have not made official statements on behalf of the board. I will not be making official statements on behalf of the board regarding personnel matters. I know you'll be disappointed to hear what you already know, that I cannot and will not be discussing personnel matters because they must be treated with the highest level of confidentiality. However, I do want to acknowledge a little bit. I want to talk about the frustration with the lack of continuity in the leadership of DeKalb County School District. Part of this frustration is because there has only been one perspective that has been given, and that is the perspective given by our former superintendent. Please rest assured her termination was not a knee-jerk reaction that happened overnight. This board sat down with the superintendent on repeated occasions to discuss the unmet needs, and I was hopeful there would be a resolution. When I got to the point I didn't see improvement necessary for our students and facilities, I felt it was time. I can also assure you more information will be forthcoming. I would now like to provide an update on some key areas from the past 16 months of my term. Before I start, I want to warn everyone that I'm going to try not to move into accountant speak and use too many terms or abbreviations. Much of what I've worked on during the past 16 months is technical and confusing enough. My training as a forensic accountant, a CPA, and a former certified fraud examiner fills my vocabulary with lots of terms that are not helpful unless you're on the witness stand, so I'm going to try not to go into jargon land. Thank you for your patience in advance because we have to go into the weeds a little bit. The first issue I want to discuss is ADA noncompliance across the district. Just a few months into my term, I became concerned about the liability related to numerous noncompliance issues identified by Perkins and Will in the facility condition assessments, the FCAs. As you probably know, the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, was enacted in the early 90s with the goal of ensuring that those who suffer disabilities are allowed equal, accommodated access to both employment and education. In the spring of 2021, I spent the better part of 2 months reading through the FCAs, and then I spent an entire weekend leafing through thousands of pages in the FCAs to manually enter ADA noncompliance costs from the FCAs into Excel to quantify the magnitude of the noncompliance. As an accountant, spreadsheets help me translate long planned documents into workable plans. I was slightly relieved to learn the cost to remedy the ADA noncompliance issues across the entire district was only about $7.5 million. Although that's a high number, this seemed solvable to me at the time, especially with a budget of over $2 billion and millions in SPLOST funding available. Even though this seemed like a fixable problem, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's a shame that we're even at this point in time. Sadly, the school with the highest cost of ADA noncompliance repairs needed across the entire county is one of our District 1 schools. Oak Cliff Theme Elementary School in Doraville at over $1 million. That's the #1 school with ADA noncompliance needs. Sequoia Middle School is in the top 10 at $212,000. I was and am deeply concerned about all schools across the school district that have ADA noncompliance issues. I told the superintendent early on we could not ignore them, and especially those communities who might not know how to even express concern. I pleaded with the superintendent to address these access issues as soon as possible, and I used my vote as my voice. I voted against certain items that were wants until we could address true needs. And I think ensuring equal access to those with disabilities is a true need. On multiple occasions, I encouraged the superintendent to please prioritize ADA noncompliance repairs. I have been in this role for 16 months, as I said, and despite repeated emails, requests at board meetings, and one-on-one conversations with the superintendent, there have been very few results. To date, the East Plus 5 adjustment list does not include ADA repairs across much of Region 1. Until that occurs, we have no assurances that DeKalb County School District is taking action. I will continue to fight for the students across the district, both in our district here in District 1 and the entire county. I want to ensure those who depend on the federally required access ADA provides are granted those accommodations. The second issue that I became curious about at the beginning of my term was the accuracy of financial reporting related to SPLOS 4 and 5, especially as it relates to the differences between the program manager reporting and the DeKalb County School District reporting. Just as a reminder, our county has just voted in November to approve SPLOS 6. So SPLOS 4 and 5 are within the last decade. And another reminder, a SPLOS, the Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax Program, authorizes the collection of a penny sales tax on any purchases that are taxed in DeKalb County. Monies collected can be used to pay for necessary capital improvements, including building improvements, new schools, classroom additions, technology, and transportation needs. When I started, my professional experience told me it would be prudent for the superintendent to undertake an independent third-party review of SPLOS accounting. We talked about this several times, and eventually at the June 2021 meeting, Mr. Estel, the former COO of DeKalb County School District, announced he'd hired a CPA to address this issue, and I was thrilled. As last summer progressed, I waited anxiously for results in hopes that it would be completed well before the board needed to vote to ask DeKalb voters to approve SPLOS 6 in November 2021. However, the vote came before the board and the SPLOS reconciliation work had still not been completed. Before the board voted to place SPLOS 6 on the ballot, I asked the superintendent if the CPA's work would at least be completed before the taxpayers would be completed and presented before the taxpayers voted in November. She assured me and committed to me that it would be completed and would also be shared with the public before the November election. I trusted her and her word and voted yes to place SPLOS 6 on the November 2021 ballot. However, as summer turned into fall and we started another school year, I grew concerned because the superintendent had provided only a preliminary report to the board via mini sessions. Nothing had been shared with the public as promised, and the work was not complete. And just as a side note, in the interest of transparency, I would prefer the Board of Education not have mini sessions, but that's another issue for another day. I just wanted to mention that. And this is a good example as why I don't think this is a good idea. Because of my growing concern, I emailed the superintendent, the chief of staff, and the board chair on August 17th and expressed apprehension about needing a SPLOS reconciliation and concern that the ADA noncompliance issues were still not scheduled for correction. I also wrote to the superintendent, and this is what I said in my email to her, we cannot ask the taxpayers for money already collected and committed to for projects, and when the projects were not completed or the scope was changed, re-ask for the same funding again. I said to the superintendent, I will not be a part of any taxpayer double dipping on the behalf of the DeKalb County School District. And here's a small example just in our district. The Ashford Park Elementary School scope of work per the contractor, which is AECOM, reported on March 30th, 2020 that there was a completed turnkey, fully functional fire suppression system meeting all code requirements for educational facilities. However, the April 15th, 2021 FCA states that the school needed emergency exit signage replacement, fire alarm replacement, and wall pack lighting replacement. These are the questions I asked the superintendent at that time. Does this double request mean that between March 31st, 2020 and April 15th, 2021, the turnkey fully functional fire suppression system that met all code requirements in March 2020 no longer meets the code requirements in 2021? Or does this mean that there are new needs that arose between those dates? Or does this mean that the fire suppression system was not completed as stated in the AECOM reports? Or does this mean that the FCA is inaccurate? No response. I made a final re-request to the superintendent, and I said, Superintendent, please let me know if you're planning to undertake this reconciliation and/or if it is already underway. This is crucial for the DeKalb County School District taxpayers and the Board of Education SPLOST 6 planning because November is not far away. Also, what is the status of the plan to address ADA noncompliance mission critical items? I concluded by saying to her in this email, I'm deeply concerned about all of this and I hope there are plans in the works now to resolve the situation. Superintendent, I know you did not create this, but unfortunately you are now tasked with cleaning it up, and for your efforts, I'm grateful. As the election season grew closer, there was finally a meeting with the CFO, the superintendent, board chair, the CPA, and myself to discuss the eSPLOST reconciliation work. On August 27th, I sent the superintendent an email about that meeting. I expressed appreciation that some work had been completed, but I also expressed concerns that still, with Election Day fast approaching, there were no conclusions drawn on the reconciliation issue, which I had been asking about for many, many months. I also asked the following of the superintendent. Number one, the CPA mentioned a mea culpa DeKalb County School District would need to consider. Can you please provide information about the status of the mea culpa? Number two, the CPA gave an estimate of about $250 million or more, which is a reconciliation difference at our meeting last Monday. It was my hope that upon conclusion of her work, she would determine that the number was immaterial, which would also remove the obligation of the mea culpa. But I doubt that is the reality at $250 million. As you recall, she indicated in her professional opinion, DeKalb County School District is a 7 or an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 of this being a serious issue of concern. The superintendent did acknowledge a shared concern about both items, but she said nothing about these issues in the upcoming September 13th board meeting. On October 12th, advanced voting began. Advanced voting ended on October 29th for the November 2nd election. 2 days before advanced voting ended on October 27th, the CPA finally made a presentation to the public, not at a board meeting, but at the eSPLOST Advisory Committee meeting. I was disappointed this didn't happen prior to the start of advanced voting, but I was also relieved it was actually happening before Election Day. The CPA explained that part of her work was to determine if there was a variance between the school district's accounting program, which is called Munis, and ProLiance. ProLiance is AECOM's accounting system. AECOM, again, is the SPLOST program manager. It is important to note that some reporting differences are to be expected. Mr. Boyd, the interim COO, explained that in the meeting, ProLiance was never intended to be an accounting tool. It's a project update tool. While I agree with Mr. Boyd's statement, responsible financial management tells us that the differences between the two systems should be quantified and understood. I was disappointed that the presentation to the public at the advisory committee meeting did not provide the same details to the public that the board was aware of from their mini sessions. Details of what I knew that was not shared with the public were the following. For SPLOST 4, Munis, which is the school district's accounting system, is greater than ProLiance by $129 million. SPLOST 5, Munis is greater than ProLiance by $150 million. To be clear, some difference is expected. However, there are some construction-related differences that are unexplained, and as a trustee of public funds, those concern me. SPLOST 4 construction and program-related variances are 29% of the overall variance at $37 million. Specifically related to District 1, Chamblee High School has a variance of $12.7 million. Munis has 48.7 for Chamblee High School construction, and ProLiance has 36 million. SPLOST 5 construction and program-related variances are 17% of the overall variance at $25.4 million. Related to District 1, Dorville United Elementary School has a variance of $8.5 million. Munis is 38 million, and ProLiance is 29.5 million. The CPA concluded in her report, which again was not shared with the public, that said, it is my opinion that the gaps in expenditures between ProLiance and Munis for construction-related projects, where every invoice is reviewed by staff of AECOM before it is paid, is too high to be able to place reliance on the accuracy of ProLiance for reports regarding expenditures on construction efforts. The variances have been known to exist for a very long time. If the growing variance between expenditures is reported by Munis versus ProLiance could not be repaired, it should have been stated to DeKalb County School District that the actuals being reported could not be brought into balance with Munis, so that together, AECOM and DeKalb County School District staff could devise a plan to use Munis or find another method of accurately reporting expenditures, so the reporting variance on actuals did not grow to the present of $280 million. As Board of Education representative and as a taxpayer, these differences concern me, and the lack of resolving these differences over a reasonable period of time also concern me. I do not know what conclusions we can draw from these differences, but I wonder if this means funds were overspent. Or could this be a simple case of sloppy accounting that just needs to be cleaned up? Or could this be a normal timing difference between two systems that simply need to be explained with transparency? The result of all of this is as of Monday, October 25th, I believe there was still a great deal of work to do. I was concerned from both a liability perspective and a financial accountability perspective. Because of the potential liability and because of the responsibility of the Board of Education members as trustee of public funds, I asked my colleagues on the board if they thought it would be prudent for DeKalb County School District to initiate an independent third-party review of eSPLOST. All 7 of us were in agreement. Because day-to-day operations are superintendent's responsibility and being a trustee of public funds is the responsibility of the board, there was an overlap of duty, but ultimately only Mrs. Watson-Harris could ask operations to issue an RFP for an independent third-party review of SPLOST funds. After numerous phone calls, emails, in-person meetings, and discussions, which began last fall, finally, on April 14th, 2022, 6 months later, the superintendent's team issued an RFP for the independent third-party review of SPLOST 4 and 5, and you can find that currently on the county's website. While it is not reasonable to expect an RFP to be issued immediately once CPA identified these differences, I do not think 6 months is a reasonable period of time for something this critical, especially because I was told all would be resolved prior to the November SPLOST vote, and because the construction-related variances are over $60 million. Total variances are hundreds of millions of dollars. This is not an immaterial amount of money, and as of today's date, May 1st, it is still unresolved. At this point, I want to finally make a final point. Thank you for your patience. I know there's a lot of detail here. I'll read a few excerpts of my statement I made at the April 18th board meeting to clear up some misunderstandings. So this is from my statement. Board policy ABB identifies 11 duties and powers. Number 11 states that the board must work with the superintendent to ensure that adequate facilities are available to educate all students in the district. Although adequate is not defined in the policy, I believe we can all agree that adequate means, at a minimum, ensuring a school's ability to remain open. This includes ensuring building safety and code compliance, the repair of severely damaged and failing building components, and other items that require near-term correction. To our students at Druid Hills High School, the good news is that by remedying the deficiencies identified by our experts, Perkins and Will, in your facility condition assessment, every single concern you have identified in your video and more will be resolved. Students, I believe you and the public have been done a disservice by being led to believe that only modernization will remedy these deficiencies. That is not the case. In fact, our experts have quantified the cost for priority 1 deficiency repairs at your school, and that is $3,590. And for those who don't know, the total for all priorities at Druid Hills High School is $6.4 million. If you're curious, the top 3 schools with the highest total deficiencies are number 1, Stevenson Middle at $17.7 million, Columbia High School at $14.8, and Chapel Hill Middle at $14.7. And students, I don't want to minimize how you feel. It matters and it's important, and so I'd like to say this. Towns, thank you for pointing out the unacceptable plumbing problem and sewage leakage issues. These deficiencies are part of the FCA Priority 3 and are described by Perkins and Will as plumbing, domestic water piping system beyond its useful life, and a need for sanitary sewer piping replacement. I believe these should be addressed as soon as possible as part of a Priority 1 remediation plan, as opposed to waiting for Priority 3 deficiencies to be addressed. This is a serious deficiency at many schools, and we should address any sewage problems at all schools immediately. So thank you, students, for making the board aware of this problem. You're leading by example, and by voicing your concern at your school, it's going to draw attention to similar needs at other schools. To be clear, we need to work through as many of these deficiencies as we can afford to at all schools, not just because the policy states the board must ensure adequate facilities for all students, but because it's the right thing to do. Students, you said safety is the number 1 word we're saying. I am saying safety is the number 1 word also, and this is why it's imperative we address the Priority 1 mission critical deficiencies across the entire district as soon as possible. I say across the district because as a board, it is our responsibility to consider the whole district and not just one school. That's the end of the excerpt from my statement, so now I just want to wrap up. The Board of Education's role is to set policy and provide clear directives for the superintendent and for her staff to carry out. The day-to-day maintenance, both repair and preventative, is solely the role of the superintendent and her staff. Board members cannot call a plumber if the principal calls with a leaking toilet, but the superintendent is empowered to do so. Board members cannot hire backhoe operating to clear an overgrown, non-functioning detention pond. The superintendent is empowered to do so. And the board members cannot call out an electrician to fix exposed wiring, but most certainly the superintendent can. That is something the board has now learned and needs to be a constant reminder for central office leadership that this must happen. So thank you for indulging me in one final point of clarification. Prior to the most recent board meeting on April 18th, on Saturday, April 16th, Chair Turner sent an email to Superintendent Watson Harris, which I was copied on, and it read in part, "Good morning, Superintendent. I see that you're up early and generating emails. I'm hoping we can have a brief discussion today as we are preparing for Monday's meeting. I attempted 2 unsuccessful calls to you yesterday, leaving a message on both of your phones. Please advise of your availability this weekend. Kindly, Turner." The next day, Sunday, April 17th, it was Easter Sunday, at 11:22 a.m., Mrs. Watson Harris responded and said in part, "Dear Chair Turner, thank you for your attempt to include me in your discussion on funding projects this weekend. I'm confident that you will have a successful proposal to present to the entire board tomorrow during the meeting. Happy Easter." As a result of the superintendent's confidence and encouragement in that email, I did as she instructed and moved forward by presenting the proposal to the entire board. It is confusing to me that she has said on numerous occasions she didn't know about it, she was unaware of the plan, because not only did she know about it, she refused to meet with me and Chair Turner to discuss it and instead expressed confidence that it would be a successful proposal presented to the entire board. I would like to wrap up by summarizing where we are now because it's important to move forward. I'm deeply concerned about ADA noncompliance issues that have been known since at least April 2021. And I'm deeply concerned about the millions of dollars of construction-related E-SPLOS variances from SPLOS 4 and 5 that were not remedied in a reasonable period of time. And I'm disappointed that the superintendent was unwilling to join discussions about funding projects and showed no sense of urgency when it came to resolving important ADA issues and other issues involving the facilities that are the second home to our children. I'm heartened to see how many of my fellow elected officials are expressing a clear and concise desire to work directly with the board to bring about meaningful progress to correct the inequities of our facilities, specifically in the areas of maintenance and ADA noncompliance. With the exception of one person, I'm disappointed that not a single elected official initiated contact with me after the termination meeting of a week ago. Thank you, Rebecca Cohen Morris. I've not had an opportunity to speak with you, but I'll reach out tomorrow. I appreciate your kind graciousness and your sincere care of our community. Having said that, I'm thankful for those who have answered my calls that I initiated after April 26th. I wish we could have spoken before you decried the board's actions, but I understand the stress and frustration. I'm especially disappointed that one mayor asked for my resignation and the board's resignation on Facebook of all places. But don't worry, we're having breakfast tomorrow morning, and I do forgive. But I look forward to discussing this with you because I want to continue to work with you. This disconnect has shown me there is work to do, and I'm here to do it. For too long, DeKalb has operated in a vacuum. As a constituent said to me today, people are disturbed by the termination of our former superintendent, but they seem entirely undisturbed by the ongoing issues of great concern to those of us who've been paying attention and calling for improvements for years. Ineffective administration, financial concerns, stagnant and declining student achievement, overcrowded and unsafe schools, teacher performance, morale, retention, truancy, underserved schools, and the neglect and atrocious conditions in half of our facilities, if not more. It is important that government entities understand that educating the children of DeKalb takes all stakeholders to come to the table, be it federal, state, county, or municipal leadership. Although I cannot speak for my colleagues on the board, I welcome the assistance in creating stability and accountability for our DeKalb County students and taxpayers once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. You up for taking a few
Sure.
questions? Allegra?
So can you let us know how many open work orders there are presently? Because you say you're looking at, as I think you should, the ADA compliance, but we as parents who have had children in the system 10 plus years, we know the thousands of work orders that are open year after year. So do you have a number of how many we have open presently?
That's a great question because we had a work order system that tracked these. We no longer have a work order system. I believe the former superintendent put a dashboard recently on the website. I know that they're still testing it. I don't know how accurate the dashboard is, but there's no longer a system to track all of those, which is, to your point, a concern.
And the reason I was asking is I'm wondering if some of what Druid Hills had in their video are actually in those open work orders that have not been fulfilled.
I should hope they are.
That it's not even from, that's why I was wondering what the number is.
Yeah, I should hope so. When I took a tour of the school, the principal who gave us the tour said that some of the sewage drainage, which is in the female visitors locker room, has existed for many years. I asked him why he didn't call the health department as a mandatory reporter, because if this has existed for years and DeKalb County School District won't fix it, something needs to happen.
Yes, sir.
Can you address or explain to me what the current status of the CMP or comprehensive master plan is? It's very confusing for me in watching all the minutes of the meetings. Where does it stand? I mean, we paid Attorney Will $2 million to help prepare the plan. Where is it right now?
The comprehensive master plan is still proceeding forward. School districts are required to develop a local facilities plan every 5 years, and part of that is the comprehensive master plan, so we have to do it no matter what. What hasn't happened is the board has not been presented with every single project to approve. My understanding is when operations is ready for us to approve a project, they bring it to us. My preference was that we would have all the projects ahead of time, see how much money was going to be spent on each one, from which source, and we would have a good map to know what to expect in the next 5 years. We didn't get that. That's apparently not how the process works, but that would have been my preference.
So if I could ask follow-up, so your proposal that was, or your motion and then approval by the board to address priority 1, 2, and 3 concerns is not a replacement for the comprehensive master plan process. Is that correct?
I don't want to define it as a replacement or not. The motion that I made was to address priority 1, 2, and 3 of all schools across the district first, not just to give $42,000 per student to one school. The modernization at one school was simply something that was going to go on the local facilities plan for consideration. There was no guarantee that that work was going to be done. And the problem with that is we have other schools that also need modernization just as much as that school. And so my suggestion to the superintendent was, let's get a list of every school that needs modernization that qualifies for it. Let's put them all on the list, not just one school.
Yes, sir.
Just a real quick question. I was just wondering, the CARES Act money, that some of which or all of which was supposed to go to maintenance of these buildings, I can't figure out where that money was spent.
I can't either.
Well, it was $500 million. At least that's what I see.
$500 million.
$500 million. Is that right?
Yes.
I think that was about right. I have asked that question multiple times of our superintendent and haven't gotten answers.
So you don't know where that $500 million?
I'm not responsible for the day-to-day operations. The superintendent is, which is why I've asked the superintendent for that information. I'm just as concerned as you are, sir.
No, I'm just asking, you have fiduciary obligation to us. I'm just wondering, you've not received any answer to where $500 million is gone.
I have not. Keep in mind that we have 3, I was gonna say tranches, but we have 3 CARES 1, 2, and 3. And each one of them has to be spent in a different period of time. I'm very worried about CARES funding 1. It has to be spent by either September 1st or September 30th. I don't recall which one. I'm very worried about that. I don't understand why that hasn't been spent. I don't understand why the deferred maintenance budget wasn't spent.
So you've asked these questions of the superintendent and never got answers?
Yes, I have.
Jen?
You very eloquently laid out a variety of communications that have taken place over the last year, and you talked about transparency to your constituents, and I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why you have not communicated this through open forums. You have a Facebook page that you post on periodically. Why have you not shared these concerns in a way that will raise them to the public so that your constituents can also be involved in raising these to the district? I'm having a hard time understanding that. And then also, you mentioned that you are not a fan of the mini sessions. So what does the board need to do to get rid of them if some people don't feel that they're applicable? Why do they keep happening? And how do they stop, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I would like to know that as well. That's a decision that's made by board chair and vice chair. I have voiced to them both that my preference would be that they not happen. And to your point, Had they not happened with the many sessions related to the CPA's work, people would have known back in August that we had these variances. I'm respectful of my relationship with the superintendent, and the last thing I wanted to do was shame her in public for frustration with communication, but I used the microphone. Multiple meetings I brought this up, and as a matter of fact, at the October meeting, the superintendent and I had a pretty deep discussion where she didn't want to do this loss reconciliation, and Mr. Burbridge stepped in and he saved the day, and he said, Mrs. Hill is right, this needs to happen. I use the microphone as my voice, not Facebook.
But many of your constituents work and are not able to attend meetings and have lots of conflicts with children and careers and aging parents and various things, and don't have a chance to sit and watch an 8-hour board meeting. So how can you be more transparent and communicate with your constituents what's going on so that we don't have to watch a very long recording month after month?
Well, and to your point, some meetings are even longer. The infamous Valentine's meeting literally started at 11:30, and I got in my car after 11 o'clock at night. I hate how long the meetings are. I would love to sit down with you and chat about ideas, or anyone that wants to. I don't know if it would be helpful if we could, as a board, hire someone to abbreviate the meetings. The school district is required, and they do post a summary of the meetings, which I try to remember to post on my Facebook page, because you're right, people can't. It's not reasonable to sit there and listen to it. I run out of steam in those things, so nobody's gonna sit there and listen to it. But I think we have to do, I'm sorry.
You're not willing to summarize key points and your.
When did you think, when did I say I'm not willing to summarize key points?
I just asked if you would post, I'm asking you, why don't you post or send a newsletter or something? Stan used to do it all the time.
My job does not require that. It is important to me to work with the community and to talk to the community. But what I cannot do is spend my time in a secretary mode doing those things, which is why I use the responsibility of the school district is to do that. And I post those on my Facebook page. And as I said, I'm more than happy to sit down with you or anyone in the community and have a discussion and hear what it is that you might like that would help. If we did that, then all of the board members could benefit, which means the entire county benefits. I certainly am a huge advocate of transparency. I think you guys all know that. You can even tell from the link that I went through today to go through the entire timeline. But to be argued with about what I am and am not doing isn't helpful. I'm asking you to please sit down with me and let's have the discussion.
Great, call me.
Can you text me your number? Do you have my cell phone number? It's 404
I'll email.
307 4679. Thank you.
I'll email.
Stacy, did you have something?
I'll say something from we have a question from the city, and I was really happy to hear that you say that you're an advocate for ADA and safety, because one issue that we have as a city is with the proposed elementary school on Shamodomini Road, that the way the intersection is going to work is not safe. The fire chief has serious concerns. The intersection doesn't align like it's supposed to. And I know the city's reached out to you, to the school board. It is a problem that we can't solve alone. And so I'm glad to hear that you are an advocate for safety, because that will be important as we move forward with these discussions on that side.
Oh, Erica? We'll get to everyone.
So the first comment is, as you guys go into this new superintendent search, one thing that I've noticed over a lot of years in this district is finally, in regards to curriculum and instruction, we were making great strides. There was a lot of support and positivity amongst leadership, school-based leadership. Teachers were gaining autonomy, and so there was real positive momentum there. And so I would encourage that to be a highlight of the focus, because at least, we've been deficient in facilities for a long time. At least part of where we were going was successful. And I personally am extremely nervous to get wrapped up into a whole new game like Dr. Green did, where DeKalb is going to magically create its own curriculum because we're smarter and better than everybody. And we're going to create our own exams that have a million mistakes in them. It created chaos, and I'm nervous about going back there. In particular, I don't know Dr. Tinsley, or Dr. Tinsley, but I do know that she was under that leadership. And I would encourage the board, and I will write Dr. Tinsley to beg them to continue on the pathway they are with CNI. And on that note regarding the board, I have a question regarding the meetings. Watching the meetings is painful. And when Cognito put out its report, at the end, one of the things that they said is, look, there's alignment on school-based leaders. There's alignment with students. Kids know what they're doing. The teachers are engaged. There's so much positivity. And then you get to the board and there's disconnect. And Lord, when you watch those meetings, it is a personal attack from one person to another. There are things that are said that cause your mouth to drop. It's like watching a soap opera half the time. And some of it goes, and it's having sat on boards and sitting on boards, there's behavior that occurs that should not occur in a board meeting. And in particular, speaking about Dr. Morley, and even in this last meeting, Ms. Turner, and is she Dr. Turner or Ms. Turner?
Ms. Turner.
Ms. Turner. Even some of her commentary towards Ms. Gebertz, I could give you a round of applause for how you feel about your own motion. I'm blown away over the lack of professionalism. What can a board do? What can you do to help shape the board to basically behave better? What are your mechanisms? What are your mechanisms? Because I feel like until there is a way to come together, as much as Morgan wants to say, I'm here for the 90,000+ kids, all I hear is she's there for herself and they complain about the whole last years of her experience.
Yeah, it's tough. I joke that each board meeting is like the family Thanksgiving meal. There's going to be a blow up. The history, but you don't know what the trigger is going to be, and it's always something. I can't control others. I can control myself. I get along with all of my colleagues on the board. I think one of the things that I do that's probably the hardest, and Allison can attest to that, she and I meet once a month. We meet the Wednesday after every board meeting. At the time, it seemed like a great idea, but Allison and I see things very differently. But the great thing is we sit down and talk, and we don't try to convince each other why you're right or you're wrong. We have conversations. Help me understand why you felt the way you felt. Help me understand why you made that motion, what that was important to you, why that was important to you. What about your lens and your experience made that be meaningful? We do it every single month, and it's incredibly helpful. I talk to Dr. Morley regularly on the phone. I get along with all of my colleagues. It's not always easy. I don't judge how others conduct themselves, even though sometimes it's incredibly frustrating, and I see people like, oh, why'd you say that? I wish that more of my colleagues on the board could do that.
So there's no
standards for how board meetings, for being able to say those things. I'm honestly in shock if there's no standards for that type of behavior, because I understand not judging someone, I understand, but alternatively, I do also see holding someone accountable, because it just hurts the credibility of the board and it hurts the business of the board. So there's nothing, it's just silence, there's nothing out there.
I had before I even got on the board, after I won the election, Mr. Orson and I, who was chair at the time, I had the exact same conversation with them. I'm like, I don't understand how this is possible. Can there not be sanctions? Can something not be done? Can we not have a timer? Can we not stop people after 10 minutes? I mean, can we have a trap or a hook or something? It's between, my understanding, according to what Mr. Orson said, is it's between the voters and the representatives.
Which is our problem in DeKalb County. Sir, you've had your hand up. We'll get to you in just a second.
Yeah, so I'm a longtime resident. I'm curious, do you know how many superintendents we've had in the past 4 years?
I've seen several numbers floating around. It's
I think
not
it's
good.
7.
Is it 7?
Yeah.
I thought it was more than that.
Two repeats.
Okay, I was
Okay.
thinking 9. That's okay.
Nine, Ramona was there twice.
Yeah.
That's a pretty low number for somebody's ability to stay in a role. So do you think that the board is really bad at hiring?
Or do you think?
I
that
haven't
the-
been, I
I'm
haven't
sorry,
been part of
can
the
I finish
hiring
my question?
process.
Can I finish my question? Or do you think that the board is dysfunctional?
I haven't been
Because
part
it
of that.
seems like what happens more often than not is we're on rinse and repeat. We're having the same conversations about the superintendent's fault. The superintendent is the problem. Your entire speech tonight was nothing more than arrows pointed at the superintendent. I see no turning of the mirror onto the board itself and no taking responsibility for the board's actions. Maybe the board is obstructing the superintendent. Do you honestly want to stand there and tell me the board is 100% perfect in its actions?
I never said that.
Because I'm asking you if you think it is.
No,
Okay, because you're spending a lot of time looking at the superintendent like she's the problem. But the same conversation has been happening for 15 years and probably longer than that. So why do you think that keeps happening?
I never said the board was 100% innocent in this.
Why do you think it keeps happening that these same conversations happen for decades with the same problem being the superintendent and not those that the superintendent reports to? Why is that? Why don't you guys take responsibility for something?
I can only tell you my experience.
You're part of a board, okay? You understand that there are others on the board as well. In your opinion, does the board have responsibility in the past 15 years for anything going right, or is everything the superintendent's fault in every case? Because that's all we hear. Superintendent's wrong. It's always the superintendent.
All right, hold on just a second. How long have you been in office?
16 months.
All right, let's not blame her for the
No, you
decision.
guys, wait a minute.
Excuse
You
me,
guys
no,
blame
the floor is mine right now. Hold on, buddy.
Excuse me, I'm still talking.
I don't care if you're talking, this is my meeting. If you wanna leave, you're more,
As if she did inside of that board meeting yourself.
please help yourself
No,
out.
I'm not leaving. I'm a taxpayer and I'm talking.
This is a private
Excuse me.
meeting from the Dunwoody
Excuse me.
Homeowners
You
Association.
stood there and blamed the superintendent who'd been there for 20 months.
How long you lived in
Now
the
you're
cab?
telling, excuse me, I've been in the cab for 25 years.
Do you elect the other 8 or 7 board members,
No, I
6
did
board
not.
members?
I
Exactly.
know.
No one in
Excuse
this
me,
room
that's why I'm
does.
asking for, now you're gonna argue with me, or are you gonna let me ask my question?
Okay.
Guys, let me,
No, excuse me, my point is.
No,
She stood there and blamed somebody who'd been in her role for 20 months. Your excuse to her, she's been in hers for 16. Why is she right and the superintendent wrong?
I didn't say she's right, but I don't wanna blame her for the sins
I'm
of the
not
past.
blaming her, I said the board. I did not mention her name once.
Okay. let me interject some context. I've been, involved
It's
with
the same
SCAP.
thing, rinse and repeat.
Let me just, as a legislator, as a former city councilman, who's been involved with the CAB schools, I was involved with the removal of the last school board that was removed by Governor Deal in 2013.
We might be heading that way again.
Give you some context. My son was in school here from 1998 and has been going back to that. What I've seen as a legislator that dealt with this all the time, and again, rinse and repeat is actually probably a pretty good term. What I've seen, just empirical observations, is the balkanization of the system. You have board members that are supported by legislators that get territories drawn to them, and the last board, the only board that the governor removed, people had fiduciary interests in businesses that were contracting out to the schools in those districts. Okay, so you had people that owned restaurant companies that were supplying food to the schools, or food distribution companies. This was the reason that this led up to that. You had, this is my district, I get mine, you gotta fight for yours. It was balkanized. It was not a unified system at all. And I'm not, and that led up to, in 2013, we were at a point, we were a couple of days away from losing accreditation totally. And I was involved with that. The governor had a tough choice because it's a very difficult choice to remove duly elected officials who were elected by their constituents. But we're at a point that a choice had to be made. Do you lose accreditation for, I think the population, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, was about 102,000. The school population was about 102, somewhere around there. Do you put that, because that affects, home values, ripples throughout the state even. This made news worldwide, but the point is it's like 6 different little kingdoms sometimes. And some of these folks got along fine. Some of them went to prison. A lot of people had, I'll tell you that when the day after the governor removed that board, we had a meeting in the governor's office with some of the school board members that were removed. Some of the school board members were doing a fine job, but the governor did not have any choice. He could not be selective with that. And we had people come into that room with the NAACP, with, constituents. Governor, why did you do this? We had one school board member said, what am I supposed to do to feed my family? I'm going to lose my contract supplying the schools. This is a board member who was voting on his own contracts. 45 minutes of all this. I've never seen Governor Deal. He's a pretty calm guy, but he had smoke coming out of his ears because after 45 minutes, he stopped it. And what he said to that board that he just removed was, we've been talking here for 45 minutes, and not one of you, not any single one of you has mentioned the end user, the student. They threw him out of his office. Proud of him, but this is going down a path where that precedent has been set with APS and with DeKalb. And in my freshman year in 2011, I actually carried that legislation that allowed them to do that. The precedent's been set. I'm not saying I can't speak to the governor's mind, but it's elevated to that level now. And I mean, the house has not been in order in decades. And that's not a judgment, that's a statement, and that's what I've observed empirically. So.
All right, you have a question?
But it's very difficult for one.
I understand. My point wasn't that she could fix the board. My point was as a general population, those of us who've been here long enough know that the board is dysfunctional.
I just wanted to put
I just don't think people want to hear that.
30,000 foot perspective.
I appreciate it.
I don't think anyone in this room is going to argue the board is dysfunctional. Unfortunately, the people in this room can only elect one of 7 board members. And as one of 7.
When we rinse repeat the fact that we put laser focus on the superintendent is the problem.
I don't think the job can be handled by one person, quite frankly. How does that get solved? I don't know.
That's the structure of the way it's designed.
Richard Woods stepped up this week and made a lot of noise. What has he done for the past 7 years? It's election year. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. All right, and I agree with you. I'm not trying to argue here. I agree with you. I'm as frustrated. I don't have kids left in the school. I'm as frustrated as you are. And
I do have kids in the school, so you can understand why I'm very.
Oh, absolutely. I was at probably 6 or 7 board meetings before it was shut off by COVID, and spoke at every sort of meeting. I was on the high school council for 3 years. I got to see a lot of it firsthand, and it's just ridiculous. And I wish we had more school board representatives that understood the job and would take their job seriously, and they don't do that. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am, you've been holding up your hand.
Okay, so my question, since you're into financials, is how it made financial sense to let go of this person, and now we're double paying for superintendents, and we're have to go out and pay for another superintendent search. Like, was there no mechanism for you guys to do like a personal development plan or some kind of intervention where y'all could have worked with her and she could have worked out her 3 years, and then we could have not been in a crisis to find a new superintendent?
I've shared everything I can about the personnel issue. Council has approved what I said tonight. That's the limit of all I'm going to say about it.
So you can't talk about how, do you think it's worth it? Do you think it's worth another $400,000 to double pay superintendents?
I'm not going to comment any more on the situation. As I said, I have been advised by legal what I can and can't say, and I've said everything I can.
I'd like answers too, but I understand that working within the public legal system, you just can't say anymore, at least she's not the chair. I'm sorry, you had your hand up. I'll get to you.
Hi, Michelle. You said at the beginning that there would be more information coming out that I'm assuming maybe might reveal some information that we were looking to know in details. Do you have an estimate on when this more information might come out?
I do not. I'm sorry. I have so many things I wish I could say. I wish we could all sit down and I could have a very long conversation about the things I know. I'm trying to balance what I know with what council has said I can share, and I'm trying to focus on what my experiences have been as a District 1 representative, not speak for the board, but I really wish that I could share more, so I'm sorry I can't.
Will you please go back to the chair and the board and see what answers we can get?
Absolutely.
If you would push them, because I think everyone in this room deserves more than what we are getting. I understand your position. I'm sorry, Andrew, you had a question back there, and I'm sorry, folks, we gotta cut this off after a couple of more questions. Oh, Andrew and then Rick, and then we'll get to Joe, okay?
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
First, I do want to acknowledge something that very few people know, but what you're doing is very hard, public service is hard. And I know this last week has not been easy on you. I know this meeting is not easy on you. So I want to acknowledge that, and I respect that. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
I have some questions which may be tough, but I want them to be answered because we want some answers. And I know there's only limited things you can give us, but there's things around this that we need to know too. My wife's gonna get me informed and rambling, so I'll just kind of go into my head.
It takes a team.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. So my sincere hope for you during this, when you were elected, was that you were gonna do a good job and you were gonna serve the students at DCSC. And I was gonna come to people and say, you know what, she's doing a good job, and let's support her, and let's give her everything she needs to be successful. That was my hope. My concern has always been for the students of DeKalb County learning in a positive and safe environment, and for them to graduate with a path to a career, tech school, or college. Some things you have said over the year. In 2020, you did a big discussion about fighting tirelessly for financial transparency and accountability. Again, in 2020, I'm quoting your website, our community expects financial stewardship. We will no longer sit quietly and instead expect appropriate care of our financial resources. 2 years later, have those promises been kept? Because this is what I'm reading now. State Senator Elena Parent called on the governor and the state superintendent to investigate the district. The president of the NAACP in DeKalb County said, the revolving door of superintendents does not benefit our children and puts our district certification at risk. The firing of Superintendent Cheryl Watson-Harris continues the Board of Education's trend of providing short-term leadership for our school district. Most of us in this room are a complete mystery of why she was fired. And maybe there are some detailed issues you can't share, and I completely understand that. But we're more concerned about how she was fired and the impact in the community. In your whole discussion with us, there's been no discussion, there's been no responsibility of the impact this firing has had in the community. Bob, is this the biggest meeting you've had for a while?
It is.
Okay, so you can tell by the interest of why this is very important to us. So think about that. It's not important why, sometimes it's important how. Just play with that. And it could be argued now that you are part of this. You are part of the dysfunction or the problem of how this happened. Maybe you try to do something behind the scenes that we don't know about, but right now, as you said, the board is a unit, and so you are a part of it. And I don't feel like there's any acknowledgement like, Erica, I understand you're frustrated. I understand that this did not go down the way I wanted it to go down. I don't hear any of that. And so, if Ms. Watson-Harris disagrees with the board or disagrees with the board direction, she's doing her job. And if she's disagreeing with you, she's doing her job. Now, ultimately, she's got to listen to you and do what you tell her to do. But I hope there was a distinction between failing to do your job and failing to do what the board has told you to do versus trying to do what the board's telling you to do, but I have $1 for $5 worth of work. And that's what my real concern is here. And so, and I have a list of questions I'll get to, and I'll even have a list. I wrote them down for you so you can answer them.
Thank you.
To follow up on what Erica said, the board does not police itself. Are you holding board members accountable for their unprofessional behavior? Me personally, they're using profanity during board meetings. They're calling each other liars, going on these bizarre tirades about whatever. They're holding mini meetings, which I see you don't like, which is great. And none of this serves students. And I really want to see that change. How does this happen? And I'm assuming you agree with me right now, but there is something Anna Hill can do. At a minimum, you could censure board members for their behavior, using the C word in board meetings, calling other board members liars, and just going on crazy tirades inside a board meeting that thousands and thousands of people watch. And then that becomes your board. That represents you and your unit and your board, and that's what you're known for then. So here's my question, and I'll give you the list too. So I really want to see some acknowledgement from you of how this has affected the community. Maybe it was justified, maybe it wasn't, maybe one day we'll never know because of whatever reason. But how have you acknowledged the impact on the community, and how has the community's trust again changed in the board? And how are you going to restore that trust? Second question, when are you personally, going to hold other board members accountable for their poor, unprofessional behavior that is to the detriment of all DeKalb County students? And three, how is an interim superintendent who was part of everything of the past, facilities not being maintained correctly, ADA compliance issues all over the place, how is this new superintendent who was part of all of this and participated in it all of a sudden going to fix it? And then, my last question is, and this is something that we've been talking about for years, and you've even used this number before. DCSD has about $1 billion in maintenance right now in construction fees. Is that about right?
I don't know that that's the number. I believe you.
Okay. You actually quoted
It's around that.
Maintenance, construction, and building, and all.
Oh, yes, and also the new construction needs, like
Yes.
Cross Keys. Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about
It's
now.
about $1 billion.
Sequoia.
SPLOST funds are roughly about $100 million a year. So roughly we need 10 years of SPLOST funds right now to fix everything that we need. How is DCSD ever going to catch up? And how is DCSD ever going to fix these issues if it lives in the constant state of underfunding? How is the board discussing this, and how is the board talking about closing this gap?
Well, I'll try to do those questions. I might have to do in reverse order, so correct me if I get off track a
I'll
little
give
bit.
you my little paper for you.
Thank you, Andrew. First, I want to acknowledge and thank you for what you said. This has been really difficult. I've been called all sorts of names, and I've been called a racist, not a racist, used by Black people, only talking at one tonight, only talking to the rich white parents in Dunwoody. I mean, it's kind of thankless, but I knew when I took on this role, I needed to have thick skin. None of this is personal as far as my personal character, but what it is, as Andrew said, this is me as board member. So let's do your questions now. Thank you. When are you going to acknowledge how this has affected the community, and how are you going to restore community trust? So I thought that I had acknowledged that. I could go back and read in the speech where I talked at the beginning about how I understood this was upsetting for the community that we're doing this yet again. And I actually had lunch with Robert Patrick on Friday, and I told him, I said, I think my biggest mistake in all of this was seeing this as a business decision. I talked to Elena Parent. She said, Anna, you can't run the school district like a business. You have to get feedback from the community and the support. So it's a really tough balance between making a decision that's in the best interest of the students and the taxpayers versus getting all of the input from the community and basing my decisions on that. Obviously, what the community says matters to me greatly because the community pays the taxes, and they're the parents and the grandparents. But on the other hand, it's tough because a board member knows more behind the scenes, in part because of many sessions, which I wish would go away, but then also just experience the one-on-one conversations with the superintendent. And at a certain point, I have to be trusted. Board members have to be trusted. It's clear that there are people who will never trust any board member, that will trust some and not others. And, maybe by the end of my term, there will be trust, and we can go out and have beer and talk about, yay, you did it. I'm fighting really hard for the kids and all of the students at all schools, not just one school that gets $42,000 per student when other schools get nothing. It's really difficult though, and I'm not always gonna get it right. There are no feelings in accounting, but I have heard what you said and I will work harder to express feelings, so thank you. When are you, Anna Hill, going to hold other board members accountable for poor, unprofessional behavior that is to the detriment of the DeKalb students? If only I could control my colleagues on the board. I do my best by being in constant communication with my colleagues. I can't control them. What?
You personally can pass a motion.
Well, I asked Mr. Orson before I got on the board and he said that that was not possible. So
Just do it.
how is an interim superintendent who was part of the dysfunction of the past going to address those dysfunctions she was a part of and solve the problems in today's environment? I don't know exactly what specific dysfunctions of the past she was part of. I wasn't on the board then, not as an excuse, but I can tell you I'm on the board now. Holding her accountable like I've done the former superintendent is my #1 goal. DeKalb has about $1 billion in maintenance and construction needs. SPLOST funds generate roughly $100 million per year. To me, it seems like DeKalb will live in a constant state of underfunding. How do you propose DeKalb closes the revenue gap? You asked exactly the point I was trying to make at the April 18th meeting. I'm very concerned we don't have enough money to do all of the things. And until the SPLOST reconciliations are completed, cleared up, we have no way of knowing, which is why I've been so frantic about doing it for so long. Can I keep this? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna take 2 more questions if
Okay.
you don't mind.
Sure.
Rick.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. It's probably the only board member who's out this week when we talked to you.
Rick, can you stand up?
Sure.
Well, I was teasing Bob. It was kind of rotten timing for the monthly meeting, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate you coming out. What's the next, I don't have to worry about this superintendent fee of $400,000. That's a lot of money, but looking at the 275 million that is missing or unaccounted for, that's a much bigger number to focus on, in my opinion. But where do you think that went? Can you comment, or what's the next step? And whose hands is this in finding this $250 million?
Well, just to make sure I'm really clear, the $250 million is related to the accounting system for the school district has one number, and then AECOM, which is the construction management company doing all of the maintenance and construction across the school district, has another number. Their number, AECOM's number, is $250 million lower than what the DeKalb County School District has. There's only a portion of that that's construction related. The RFP went out on April 14th, I believe, and if you can go on the website and read it, but unfortunately this stuff takes a long time. And I think that they project October is when the report will be ready. That's why I wanted this done last year. I wanted last October this to be cleared up before SPLOST 6 went on the ballot.
So it's possible it could be fraud by contractors or something?
No, I can't say that. I would never suggest that I think that there's fraud at all. As I said in my statement, it could be as simple as timing differences in accounting. It could be a little bit of sloppy accounting. It could be systems that are being updated and that need to be caught up. It could be nothing other than an explainable variance that's absolutely normal in business practices. My desire as a professional and a board member was, let's just figure out what the variance is about so that we don't have to guess and wonder. Because we don't want people to think maybe there's fraud, maybe there's a problem, maybe we don't have the money. And that concerns me. I want that cleaned up and I want it explained.
Joe. Hey, Anna,
Hey,
thank
Joe.
you for being here as well. I think any communication you can do, just as your own, if it's constant contact or update or your personal thoughts would be great.
Thank you.
Quick question is, as we are in council, every 7 of us are individually elected as well. And so it's that there's the letter of the law and you've got your charter, you have your rules, and then there's the spirit of the law and how people actually interact with each other. I've been on this my 3rd year. We've had 3 retreats. Our city council has strategic planning retreats. We just did an overnight, 2 days. Do you guys hold retreats?
We do. We just had one 3 weeks ago.
And are you guys doing team building type activities where, and just, are you calling each other doctor and Mrs. this, or are you on a first name basis with everybody? How, the interpersonal, right? When you're outside of the dais, are you guys building, collaborating and building a team?
We did have an overnight board retreat about 3 weeks ago, and it was over there at Villa Christina, whatever that hotel is. I didn't know, but the public can actually come to those and observe. It's not a formal meeting. As far as calling people by their first name, I'm not calling Dr. Morley anything but Dr. Morley. But as I said, I get along with all of my colleagues, and I think there's a mutual respect between myself and the others. We didn't do trust falls and, what's your personality type thing, but we did have some executive session issues. We've had a lot of, without getting into details, because of COVID, there's been a lot more student appeals, students coming back and having difficulties that have taken up a lot of time. You might have seen a lot more meetings beyond just the monthly board meeting. Executive session is a time-consuming thing. I hope that we can do more of those, where we do have sort of the more casual team building, because I think it really helps with, sort of the relationship building.
I'm going to cut it off there, guys. I appreciate it. We'll see if we can make, Jerry was going to ask.
Yeah, I wanted to suggest, because I was listening to what other people were saying, as far as being in touch with your constituents, and I was wondering if you could have town halls. During this pandemic, there have been House representatives and state representatives and state senators who've done town halls over Zoom. And I think that perhaps there would be a better connection with your constituents if you perhaps do that. And the other thing I want to say as a former teacher is that continuity is so important for the students. I stopped teaching when my health made me absent too much. And this constant changing of superintendents does damage the students. It does.
It does.
You need continuity. And I think that if you have town halls, even if they're on Zoom, you can post them on Facebook, you can let civic association leaders know about it. I think that might be helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thank you for
you're
coming.
right. Thank you. Comparability was another issue with continuity that really did damage. I may take a point of personal privilege and see what Long's question is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Silver lining in all of this. I believe in finding the.
I didn't pay him for this.
I believe in finding the positive of chaos, right? So you have done something amazing that historically has not happened in DeKalb. You have 12 mayors behind one letter. You've got county commissioners that are aligning with them. If we can get the community aligned with the mayors and the county commissioners, we can help you establish board meeting policies. And a plug for myself, if they can't get board meeting policies so that there's workable decorum during a board meeting, I'll find a legislative solution for it.
You never sat in the DeKalb delegation meeting.
One final statement. One way that the community can help, and I know you probably don't believe this, but public comment at board meetings is incredibly important. Over the last year, we've had many times, even though there's 20 slots, we've had 3, 4, 5 people. My colleagues on the board really listen to that. I listen to it too, but I've had colleagues say, well, no one really said anything about blah, blah, blah. I guess it's really not an issue. And I think people are frustrated going to the meetings, expressing what's on their mind, and then nothing happening. But I can tell you from my experience, when I started going down to the meetings by myself after my son graduated from high school and complaining, well, I should say differently, expressing frustration about the late financial audits and the poor audit results and the material weakness and internal control. I'm not giving myself credit for that, but it brought it out into the open. And so to the extent that you have time to do that, I think it's a really good thing. It would be very helpful. You can even do it remotely. They give you both options. And for those who don't know, the board meetings are back in person now as well. I think I don't know, I'm not part of the planning process, but they are allowing a handful of people in, and then more and more and more, and eventually going to go back to the way it was before, but they have started to open the doors back up again. So thank you guys so much for coming, and I appreciate everyone's understanding this is a tough job, and as always, please email. Oh, Evan has a question. Well, I'm glad to see you too, Evan. Hi.
Anna, thank you very much for coming. I know it's some
You're welcome.
crazy times, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Before we go, and I don't think we have a board-only session tonight. I don't think there's anything to discuss. Tom Taylor wanted to bring up one.
So tomorrow, early voting starts for primaries. Primary in person ends early and in-person ends May 24th. You can get the schedules. You can go out online in DeKalb County, and I'll shoot this to Bob or whoever's going to put it out. The website you can go to, you can get a sample ballot. They are pretty extensive. It's by party, and there's a nonpartisan one. So you, Republican, Democrat, nonpartisan. The nonpartisan one is pretty short because it's just mostly nonpartisan offices like judges and all. But just to give you an idea, the Republican and Democratic ballots are about 4 pages each, and because there's a lot of language on here for, basically referendum issues, the city, the SPLOSTs and things like that, general obligation bonds. Some of them will or will not appoint to you, but you can go in on the DeKalb County website, which somebody from DHA will distribute. Put in your address and all, and request, one of those 3 ballots. Basically, you can look at it ahead of time because there are a lot of candidates on here. I mean, I've been in government a long time. And I looked down this list, I said, God, I've never met any of these people running for this office or whatever. But I urge you to look at it ahead of time so you don't get in the voting booth and have 4 pages of stuff before you go do some research before you vote, because there's a lot on here. Other dates, May 24th cuts off the primary. It has to be runoffs, and there will be quite a few runoffs in a lot of races on both sides of the aisle. That'll be June 26th, early voting. Nothing after that until the general election, and that's the normal early voting schedule. Vote in November. That's going to end it. But the dates I would look at if you're planning on summer vacations: March 24th, June 26th. So, my 2 cents. Go out and vote.
Appreciate everyone coming. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching tonight. The next DHA meeting is in June. Please watch the website at dunwoodyga.org for more information.
If I